you're going through this and it's just coming another day at work. And you kind of stop and you kind of like, wait a second here. We're actually running a time machine. Like, don't forget that, you guys. Like, that's what I kept saying to my employees. Like, we're running a time machine and it's actually working. This is pretty cool.
Keep watching to learn more, and don't forget to subscribe.
You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, Mind, Body, Spirit University, a leader in fully accredited in-person and online U.S. college degree programs in the topics we cover here. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hi, I'm Dr. Deborah Lynn Katz, and I'm a guest host on New Thinking Aloud, produced by Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove. Today, my guest is Greg Kolodziejzyk. He is best known as a triathlon athlete, having completed 12 triathlons and winning several marathons. And he also has broken world records by developing technology transportation that would go over land. Also a longtime entrepreneur. He is a stock fund manager and developer, and he also is best known amongst New Thinking Aloud guests as the person who conducted a 13-year study in associative remote viewing, which yielded over $100,000 in stock trade wins. And now he's returning with another project. This project did not take nearly as long to complete, but instead of him having himself as the single remote viewing subject, he went way in the opposite direction and had 5,000 participants, people from all over the world who had never done remote viewing before. So we're going to take a deep dive into this project, and we're going to find out, did he actually make money from it, and how were his statistics, and how the heck did he recruit over 5,000 people who had never done remote viewing before, didn't even know what remote viewing was. So there's so much to learn from speaking with him, and thank you so much for joining us. So, Greg, can you start off by telling us, how did you get into these topics around precognition and associative remote viewing?
This would have been going back a long, long time. I guess it was back in the kind of the mid 1990s, kind of that area. And I was doing a little bit of trading and noticed that every day I'd come into my office and I had a monitor with, it wasn't CNBC at the time, it was Financial News Network. This was pre-CNBC, but it was playing up on the screen. They had a little Dow Jones Industrial Average price in the bottom corner. And I come back from lunch and for some reason, I knew what the number was always. Like, it would fluctuate around even to the decimal. And I just thought, that's just odd, really weird. And I was telling my friend about this at lunch, and he told me about the Princeton pair research with the random number generators. They were also doing some research with remote perception, they called it at the time. This was before I think they knew of the term remote viewing. And I was really just fascinated. I didn't believe him, of course. I was absolutely fascinated. And I looked it up and I bought, I think that's his name, right? I bought his book, Margins of Reality, I think it was called. I remember it. And I just devoured it. And I was like, this is crazy. This is just absolutely crazy. I wondered if there's a way I could use remote viewing to make it more of answer a binary question so I could use it for my trading. And then I started kind of imagining the whole association with the two binary outcomes, being able to associate two pre-known photographic targets with the two outcomes. And like I told you on our last talk, I had also read Joe McMonagle's book at the time. So I sent him an email and said, Joe, I came up with this amazing idea to how you can remote view outcomes of future events. And I described the whole thing to him, the two photos and all of that stuff. And he said, well, Greg, he said, that's actually already been invented. You didn't invent that. It's called Associative Remote Viewing, and Russ Targ had basically, done some experiments, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty cool. So that's kind of how I got started.
So you actually came up with the procedure independently before you even learned of the research that Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ and Stephen Schwartz had been doing.
If you think about what's going on and you think about the problems with remote viewing, and a lot of it is when you know what you're predicting, your psychology and your brain gets involved in the process, and that completely wrecks it. And I knew that. I'd kind of done a little experimenting with it, and I understood that you don't want your brain to get involved. And the only way to do that is to hide what it is you're trying to predict. And the only way to do that is to associate the outcomes of what you're trying to predict with something else. So it's kind of obvious. Everybody would come to that same protocol, I think, eventually, if there's a need for it, right? And I had a need for it, so that's kind of how it happened.
And did you have any intuitive experiences when you were younger, or did you really just start to notice this when you were doing your trading?
I just noticed it doing my trading and the monitor, just having a sense for the price. Of course, I just thought that I was in tune with, the markets, and that I, was just really good at, but it just got really uncanny how I could pick out the decimal point. I was just curious about why, but no, I never really noticed it until I actually started to set photographic targets up and try it out myself just to see what it was about. And that's when I started seeing, like, right away that, I could, pretty surprising, my first few, like everybody, I think they had their best remote viewing sessions, I think, right at the very beginning when you don't know what to expect, and there's no expectations and no pressure.
Do you remember what were a couple early targets you did where you really surprised yourself at how well of a match you had? Or I know you've done so many targets since then. It's probably hard to remember.
So many targets. But yes, I do remember. I remember one. I was away on a vacation. I was on the beach. I was lying in the beach lawn chair, and I was reading. I forget the name of the book. Anyway, it'll come to me, but it doesn't matter. It got me thinking about remote viewing, and I closed my eyes and I tried to imagine my son, who was at home. He was probably 6 years old or 5 years old at the time. And they were at home at the time. And I tried to imagine what he was doing. And I saw him very, very kind of clearly in my imagination, lying in his room with a really bright light. Like at night, he was sleeping, but there was a really, really super bright light beside him for some reason. And I came home and told him that. And he said that he had woken up the night before because his electronics kit turned on in the middle of the night, because he was building a little light electronics project of some kind for school. And the light came on in the middle of the night, and it woke him up, and he turned it off. So I was kind of like, wow, that was probably my very first experience. And I was probably reading something from the book that said, try this on your own. This is, really, and that's why I said, okay, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. And that's what happened.
Wow. Well, and getting into the topic of associative remote viewing, I was looking over your Time Machine website, and I thought you had an excellent description of ARV, because you didn't even start with saying this is an intuitive process. You just were telling people, I'm going to show you two photos, and you just need to tell me what they are before I show them to you. And so can you just go over the definition of associative remote viewing for people who are brand new to the topic?
Do you want me to talk about how we associate the outcome to the photos and go through that whole?
People think of remote viewing where you're going to directly somehow tune into the stock trade if it goes up or if it goes down. And then they get confused about, well, why are you talking about pictures of oceans or bicycles? So can you explain the ARV process?
It sort of stems from the research done with forced choice experiments versus free response experiments. A forced choice experiment is where you're doing what you suggested. You're looking directly toward the event and trying to predict the outcome of the stock market, or in the early days, there were Zener cards, right? You're trying to predict a hidden card, and it's either a star or a triangle or a circle or something, right? That's forced choice. You know what the possible answers are. Whenever you have a forced choice experiment, your thinking brain starts getting involved. And of course, you know that the last one was a square, and so this one can't be a square and it has to be. So the thinking part of your brain gets involved and it wrecks the whole process. Intuition has to come from your subconscious mind, and you can't allow your brain to think over it, right? And so free response experiments were experiments where the participant didn't know what they were predicting. So a hidden photograph, for example, could be anything in the world. And then, they would guess what was in the photograph using their subconscious mind and their intuition with, just the first thing that came to your mind, basically, is usually what I tell our participants. The first thing they should try doing is close your eyes, and what's the first thing that comes to your mind? That's probably going to be something to do with the image, maybe. So they would take that and they would send that out to a third-party analyst or judge. That third party would compare the participant's transcript, what they said they thought was in the picture, with the actual picture and a dummy target, not knowing which was which, and score the two. And at the end of the day, they had higher scores for the correct target, statistically higher than the incorrect target. And that's how they were able to measure free response experiments getting a higher effect size than forced choice experiments. So the problem when we're trying to predict the outcome of a financial event is, again, I know what the event is. I know I've got opinions. I've got hopes and fears about what's going to happen. And we don't want those becoming involved with the intuitive process in the subconscious mind. So we've got to hide the outcome. So I might know that I'm predicting the outcome of the NASDAQ index, for example. But what we do is we hide the two possible outcomes, which is up and down. So it can either go up in price or down in price. We take those two and we associate them with two random photographs chosen from a very large database of pictures. So we've got two pictures. One picture here is associated, so picture of an ice cream cone is associated with the market going up. Picture of a hamburger is associated with the market going down. So I can't see the two pictures. What I do is I try to imagine the picture I'm going to be shown tomorrow after the market closes. And I'm going to be shown the picture that corresponded with what the market did. So if the market went up tomorrow, I'm going to be shown the picture of the ice cream cone. If the market ends up closing down tomorrow, it's the hamburger that I'm going to see. So before all that happens, I'm going to go, gosh, I think I see something that's round and, white. And I write that down, and the analyst, who's not me, looks at both pictures and goes, oh, I think Greg's describing the ice cream cone. I think Greg's going to see the photograph of the ice cream cone tomorrow. Therefore, the market has to go up, right, in order for him to see that. Because if the market goes down, we're going to show him the picture of the hamburger. And what he's described looks more like the ice cream cone. So we make a prediction that the market's going to go up tomorrow. We may take a bet. We place our, risk our capital. And then tomorrow, if the market goes down, I see the picture of the hamburger. This is an important step that you've got to people get confused on all the time. It's like, no, we thought it was the ice cream cone. No, I see the hamburger. I see and I was wrong. We were wrong. Like, we get it wrong. Either the analyst got it wrong, or I got it wrong, or the process failed. And that happens a lot, right? I mean, of course. So that's basically what associative remote viewing is. Taking of the binary outcome of an event, a yes, no, up, down, and associating that with two random images and going through that process.
Yeah, so it really opens up the whole world of photos. Like, it could be a photo of anything. It could be an object, a location.
Exactly.
So there's endless choices that it could be. So you're not just stuck on, is it going up or down, which
exactly
really messes with your mind.
Right. And that's a free response. It's a form of a free response experiment because I can't think the answer. I've got to go, I have no idea what it could be. And then you let your subconscious mind feed you intuitive insights about it. Could be a color, could be a feeling, it could be some visual thing, something audio, something that you hear. It's all kinds of things. Whatever it is that comes to your mind, you write down. And
when you're doing your remote viewing sessions for ARV trials, yourself or the viewers you work with, you're recommending that they do pretty short sessions, right? Like they're not doing an hour-long session like you might if you were looking for a missing person or really having to go in depth into describing a location or something like that. But I did read on your website that you were telling people that they should include more than just one or two words, that people tend to do better when they at least include a few sentences. Can you talk about your perspective on that?
that's a really good question. So, and that I've been asked that a lot. Why are you doing so many small trials? And we sort of nest the small trials together into one prediction and take a consensus of all the trials rather than just spend a long period of time with one target. So the problem is that, so we randomly choose two images, and let's say one image is fairly simple, snowman, and the other image is very, very complex image, right? Right away, we kind of have a bit of a problem there, because if I spend too much time remote viewing which picture is the correct picture, I'm probably more likely to describe more things in the complex picture just by chance alone. That's just going to happen. Than the snowman. So there's a problem when you've got a mismatched targets and you've got random chance is going to end up finding stuff in the wrong picture, right? So to mitigate that issue, what we do is we break up that one big remote viewing trial up into a whole bunch of very, very small, individually quantifiable chunks, I guess, if you will. So we'll have two targets, and then two more targets and two more targets. So it basically rules out that any one target's going to pull us away and get it wrong. It's exactly the same thing as taking one large photograph and dividing it up into a whole bunch of little squares, and then taking your time and remote viewing each square. And then, and then when the analyst is looking at each square, it's the same thing. I'm doing exactly the same thing. It's basically one target, but one target contains a whole bunch of different pictures, and it just works better statistically. It works better that way when you break it up and you can quantify it all.
So are you saying then that, say there's one event, the event is the stock going to go up or down by closing time today? So that's the event. But then you would have multiple viewers view different targets for that. And there's different target pairs. So there's it could be either two options and they're going to do their best to describe the one that they're going to see in the future. But you repeat several of those for a single
Yes,
in order to get your confidence up.
Yeah. So when I did my first experiment back in 1998, I started in 1998 and published the paper in 2011. That experiment, I was the only participant. I was the only viewer in the experiment. And what I would do is one question about the market may actually happen in a week from now, or sometimes it was 2 weeks. And I would spend every single day from now until the event starts doing trials. And sometimes I would do hundreds of trials and then manually do the analysis of the judging of all of them, which one up, down, and then take a consensus of all that. And that's what the trade would be, is a consensus of all those things. When I came away from that, I thought, I don't really want to continue doing this because it's a lot of work. It really is just too much work. I don't want to do it anymore. And there's no way of automating this. Somebody's got to do the analysis. And that's a problem as well. We're human beings. There's confirmation bias. There's all kinds of emotional problems with that whole process. And I didn't like it. I realized in 2021 or something, when ChatGPT first came around, I thought, oh, this is very interesting. So this could solve that analyst problem, being very subjective about what decision is. That could solve that problem. And now I think what we could do is do what I was doing, except crowdsource that so I don't have to do it. So we could take advantage of more consensus by finding lots of participants and collectively take all of the consensus to make the trading decision. And we're talking not hundreds of trials, but now we're talking thousands of trials. And that's what kind of started my whole time machine project idea was this. That's kind of what started the whole thing.
Your first project was oftentimes referred to as the 13-year study. You actually
Yeah.
did it over the period of 13 years, and then you eventually published it, and it got published in the Journal of Parapsychology. And then you also made some money from that project. Can you talk about that?
When I started it, my intention absolutely was to be very regimented about the protocol and the process, keeping very, very close track of every single trial, the prediction, every single trade, the outcome of the trade, so that someday, and I wasn't even sure how I was going to do this, I could publish it or release it or do something, but I knew that, there's a potential that I could be challenged, happened over a long period of time. Like, how did you keep track of everything? So I wanted to keep very, very careful track. And it just worked out at the end that, I had all of that data that I kept. And I thought, I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. And I think it's time to finish it and actually write a paper and publish it all using this. So I had all the data from all the trades. I guess it was, and I have to look up the amount in the paper. It was like $146,000 was the profit that I made from all of all those trades over the 13 years.
And how many trades would you say you placed during that period?
185 trades, 1,677 trials.
Oh my gosh.
So some of those trades had 3 trials, some had 30 trials, some had 300 trials. So I was playing around to see if more trials, more significance, or more consensus would actually create a higher win rate.
And that's incredible because you were the sole viewer.
Yeah.
So you did over 5,000 remote viewing sessions.
Yeah.
Did you find that you improved over time, or talk a little bit about your remote viewing skills?
I don't think so. I think, you ebb and flow like we do in every aspect of life. We kind of go through highs and lows, and you get tired, you get bored, you get excited, it's the same thing with this. I would go through periods where I'd just be awful, and I go through periods where I'd be much better. And I don't know if the cause of that was me personally, or if it was some other external causal factor like lunar phase. I did measure a peak in effect size during the full moon. And we also found the same thing too with this time machine experiment. So there are some external causal factors which do come into play here. Solar wind is another one that I found as well. It could also be personal things too. You get tired and take a break and come back and you do good again.
So can you talk about the solar wind and the moon and what you found exactly? Did you find that those had an impact on your performance or correlation, I should say?
Yeah, I found for the first experiment, the 13-year experiment, by the end of it, we did I put that in the paper? I'm just going to look through the paper real quick. I don't think we did, but I did find a peak in effect size right on the full moon. So, and it may not have been statistically significant in that the peak effect size on the full moon may not have been significant compared to the effect size during other times. In other words, the error bar probably wasn't 2 standard deviations from the new moon, for example, but it was consistently through the period of time always performing better over the full moon. So it's probably why we didn't put it in the paper, because there was no statistical significance that we could kind of use to put it in the paper. But I did find that it was very consistent. Weak, to put it that way. It was a very weak effect, but it was consistently there.
Would you do your sessions at night when the moon was out, or?
No, the full moon, it doesn't matter if it's in the sky or if it's not. It's still a full moon, and it lasts for a day or two and then changes from there. So I never really, and I think for a while I tried to remote view at 1330 local sidereal time, according to James Spottiswood's famous local sidereal time study. And that did not seem to have any effect at all. In fact, I got together with him after And we went through all my data and did the conversion to local sidereal time, and there's no correlation it wasn't similar to his data at all. So I don't really.
Well, and didn't he redo his study and then find that there wasn't the same effect the second time around? Do you know, is that where he left it, or does he still feel that?
I still think that there is an effect there. I still think there is a legitimate, statistically significant peak at 1330. And with the time machine experiment, we also do have a peak at 1330. We also have peaks at other times too, though. And it's not the highest peak. And again, it's not statistically significant, so we can't really do anything with it, but it looks like his data. So it is a little bit of a confirmation for him.
You are a longtime athlete, a marathon runner. You've done triathlons. So can you talk about the comparison between the ebb and flow with that, where sometimes your performance is higher or lower versus with remote viewing? Do you see parallel?
I'm going to have to say no. And the reason I don't see parallel is because I don't believe, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. A lot of people are going to disagree with me, that it's a trainable skill. I don't think it is. In my experience, I've never seen any ability to, and even all our thousands of participants that we had through the experiment here, I didn't really see anybody demonstrate any ability to get better at doing it from the start. It just didn't happen. Statistically as well, in the database, there's no evidence of improving skills there. So versus an athletic sport skill is you get better, your endurance gets better the more you train, you get stronger. So there is that side of it there. You keep pushing because you want to get better. With remote viewing, I just don't see that.
Let me ask you, was there ever any intervention other than that people kept doing the same thing they were doing over and over again? Like, did people go for training? Did you go for training? Because I would suggest that if you or any of them came to my remote viewing class or another trainers like Laurie Williams or Paul Smith and learned some new ways to handle the task, and maybe different tasks too, right? Not just like 5 minutes for a picture, but a real life tasks that you might see a difference. So was there ever any further development, or it was just a matter of they just kept doing the same thing over and over again?
Good question. Okay. I'll have to give you that for remote viewing training, when you're remote viewing the actual event, not ARV, but something where you're actually going to the event to remote view it, some future outcome of something, or, a place or something like that, then I think that's where training can actually be beneficial, because what the training does is it breaks that big, huge monumental task of predict this place that's, I've got the coordinates in this folder, where is it? Well, there's, how is it? What's the temperature like there? What's it feel like? What's the air smell like? There's all kinds of, what's the history of it? There's many different aspects of that target. And I think that's where training is very valuable, is that structures that, breaking it down into small little chunks and going at each one, sort of like how I do the ARV, where we've got many, many trials nested together for one prediction. So every trial could be considered a different aspect of that one prediction. Right. So same thing with going, predicting, a hidden place or something like that. You're breaking it up. So I think, and I took Lynn Buchanan's course, CRV course with Lynn, and that was great. I really enjoyed it. And I saw the benefit of that kind of thing. But I do believe that when it comes down to, the important parts of that, yes, you're going in there to determine the overall gestalt of it, right? You still have to use your subconscious, you still have to remote view that. And I just don't see that part of it getting any better. It's just the way it is. You're born with that, and it's kind of the way it is.
Yeah. So I've found that when you help people to switch around even their sensory modalities, like, okay, today we're going to visualize a screen and we're going to go through things visually. And then the next day we're going to practice more so using our bodies and seeing what our bodies are doing. Or the next day we're going to work on our sketching. that you're going through your different senses. And sometimes people will spend years just in one modality, like they never tried, like, oh, I never tried to, use a screen, or I never tried to send myself over here. So sometimes just using different approaches that they didn't think of before can help. But I think it's interesting how you're talking about breaking down even more complex scene, and that kind of equals shorter sessions. If you have a complex location, you can't get all of it at once. You'll see the front door. And then if you want more information, you have to tune in again to see like the back of the house or what's at the roof. And you can almost look at those as mini remote viewing sessions, which the mini part would be for ARV. So when I'm teaching a class and I have new students coming in who I haven't met before, I always know the ones that have only done ARV because they supply one page of data. Like no matter what the task is, it's pretty much one page of data. And then it's like, okay, well, this is a great start, but we need to teach you so you could be providing 20 pages of data or answering several questions. But ARV seems to be a great way to get people started with and then preparing them for more complex tasks.
I agree with you. And I think there's value in training for that reason. What came to mind when you were talking about this, I remember for some reason, maybe based on something that I read or something, one trial a long time ago, I tried to imagine what if I was the subject, the object in the picture. I'd never done that before. And instantly I got a sore back. Like I felt my back was really sore. And I forget what the picture was, but it was a horse with his back hunched over, and it was something with, it was something, his back was very prominent in the picture. But I found that was really interesting, something I never would have thought about before. And it would actually improve that trial. And so ever since then, I started doing that more and more. So I think the training helps in that way. Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. Well, and so let's talk about your most recent time machine project, because you did something so interesting. You hired people from around the world who had no previous experience with remote viewing. Many of them probably had never even heard of it. Can you talk about from the start, how did you recruit the people? Who were they? And how did you get them involved in your project?
So getting back to the first experiment, I came away from that having this, I knew that more consensus was better. So I knew that worked. I wanted to prove or find out, learn if we could do the same thing with even more consensus, not using me as the subject. So that meant I had to if we could hire enough people using the internet, using an app, using an LLM to do the analysis, then we could do thousands and thousands of trials in a day, every single day. I figured that was possible. So that was kind of what I was trying to accomplish with this, is scale that up to that point to see if all that consensus would actually have an effect on our performance. So when we first started out, I wrote sort of a demo version of the app. This is basically how it's going to work. Found an LLM that would do the analysis, and we kind of tied it in there. And then I think I put it out to a group of remote viewers to have them start to do some trials so we could, see if this whole thing's going to work at all. And we started to get really good effect right away. And so I thought, okay, we need to go and now rebuild the whole thing to make it robust enough that we could get it out to the world and thousands of users simultaneously, actually, using it all and not crash the server. And so the version I made was primitive and just a test one. So the challenge was finding people. I probably would have preferred to stay in the community and hire or find remote viewers, people who had some experience. But I knew that I was never going to find thousands of viewers that would want to do this consistently and also do it to get paid $5. That's not going to happen, because most of them are going to be in North America or Western Europe, and they're not going to want to do it for $5. So we went to the job sites, Upwork and Freelancer. There's a bunch of sites in India where you can, and so we started hiring from there. I guess we offered, you had to set a minimum payment. The minimum payment was $5. They had to do 10 trials a day for 10 days. So 10 predictions, 10 trials each, and they would get their $5. And then they would get a bonus if they got more than 50% right and 60% and 70% or whatever. Their bonus would go up higher. So that's kind of how we structured that.
Wow. And how many participants did you have total?
I think in total we went through, there was maybe 4,500 participants that went through the program over in the year that we were doing it. Daily basis, we started out with 1,000 trials. So the way that it worked is we had one prediction a day, and that prediction was the outcome of the NASDAQ futures market from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, Mountain Standard Time. That was the same every single day. So 5 days a week, we had a trade first thing in the morning. And when we started out, we had enough participants to accumulate 500 trials for that one day. So we would just basically add up the scores for all 500 trials, and we would go with the consensus, the majority vote. If most of them saw the target corresponding with down, we would short the market. If most of them saw the target corresponding with up, we would go long the market. It was that simple. There wasn't nothing more complicated than that. And then over time, we got better with our process and our onboarding and our hiring and our server and our software. And we were able to get up to the point where we had, we had 5,000 trials in a day. That was our peak.
Oh my gosh.
Partway through the program. Towards the end of the program, we had 5,000 trials a day. And that would have been contributed by 500 people. So 500 different people each doing 10 trials for that day. That's what that would be from. So 500 people we had hired at that time.
10 trials in a day is a lot of trials for one viewer or participant. And 10 in a week would be a lot. Like I typically, for an experiment, would only want a viewer even to do 1 or 2 a week. So I'm curious, did you track the progress of those predictions throughout the day? Like, did you find that the ones they did in the morning were more accurate than the ones they did later in the day?
Yes. First of all, the entire 10 trials usually took about 15 minutes. So they were very fast. So it's not like, they're spending a lot of time on each trial. It's very quick. So the app is structured that way. They push number 1 and they write down a few things, and then they push number 2 and they, write down a few things. It's all text based, and they'll push number 3 and they go through, and that's how they do their 10. And then the 10 gets submitted. The LLM scores them. We have our prediction already, and we wait for the next set of trials, and they're done for the day. They can go off and do. So it wasn't a lot of work for them, right? We have a peak effect size at 12 noon, true solar time. True solar time is when the sun's at the highest in the sky for wherever your geographic location coordinates are. So there's an astronomical calculation that you can do to figure that out. And we did that, and we found this peak effect size exactly 12 o'clock.
So it sounds like you were thinking maybe it had something to do with the solar activity, but I would think that maybe they were now getting warmed up, but they weren't exhausted from all the other trials they had just done. Did you consider that? Because I would just think that after 5.
No, because one participant going in to do their trials for the day, they're going to do them all in 15 minutes. So they're going to come in at 12 o'clock and do them all at 12 o'clock. They're not going to do ones before and ones after. Every day they're going to come back and do it.
So they're only taking 15 minutes to do all 10.
Yes.
But how about that? During that 15-minute period, did you assess if the first few ones even were more accurate than the final 7 through 10?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, I think, and 10. It was something like that. So yeah, we did do that. And that's something else I'd like to put in the paper too, is go back to that and see. But we did find they did perform better at the beginning of their session than at the end. And that was kind of interesting that we had their one 20-minute remote viewing session broken up into 10 little sections. And we could actually track and see how, so very interesting. So yes, you do better at the beginning and then right at the very end. Because I think you sort of want to end on a good note or something. It's strange, but it's a very strong effect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I would expect from doing so many, even if they're just doing short ones, because all that information just starts to get jumbled in your head. But then you also said that they were only supplying words, they were not sketching.
Yes. Yep.
So the AI model at this point in time doesn't tend to be able to evaluate sketches easily. Was that the reason you just had them enter words?
Also, I think technically too, I didn't want to get to a point technically where we had to provide some way for our participants to draw and scan and dump in and do all that stuff. That would have been hundreds and hundreds of people doing this. And you don't want to have to deal with tech support issues for all that. Typing, describing what you saw worked pretty good.
Now, you had some issues with some of your participants cheating or just trying to submit anything so they could get their $5. Can you talk about that?
It was an ongoing battle trying to uncover participants with multiple accounts, and they weren't allowed to do that according to the rules that, we gave them. The job, the job post says you can't do that. They did. They tried to do that with different email accounts, and we found that we had much better luck staying with the larger job platforms because they do some work in making sure that an individual profile is only one profile, but we did get lots of people. And when we tried to go away from the work platforms and find our own, we found that was a real serious problem. Yeah. So we found them. The way we found them was we just basically set up looking through the transcripts. If you've got 2 or 3 accounts, you're going to copy paste between the transcripts because it's faster. And we found copy strings of words that would be unlikely to occur just by chance alone, like 10 words that are exactly the same, with 4 or 5 different people, all of them are either working together or more likely they're the same person. And they're just blasting through them, trying to get $5, $10, $15, $20.
Oh, well, that's one argument for not paying people because usually remote viewers so much want to do a good job. They don't have a reason to just be putting in any words like that. But did you do any analysis on those people? Because in a way, that would be an interesting control group where they're just trying to give you any words so they could get paid. But I'm wondering if you found any side effect in that, even despite, if they're just like, oh, I'm going to put in any word. I don't believe in this stuff. But then if they had some good hits, regardless, that would be pretty interesting.
First of all, there probably wasn't enough to do any real serious statistical analysis, but we didn't find any drop in performance, unfortunately. That was bizarre. We thought that would be the way we could tell that they were cheating, is there would be a drop in performance, but there wasn't. So that was baffling, actually.
Yeah. Well, if it's the subconscious that's coming up with data, why are they coming up with those words? They may think, oh, I'm just pulling a fast one here, but
yes,
it may really be there was still a side effect.
As far as we could tell, there still was with these cheaters. And so, we just stopped firing them and we stopped policing them after a while because we didn't see any decrease in performance. So we just let them go through.
That's really interesting. So tell us about the results of the Time Machine project, both statistically and financially.
We started the experiment kind of officially in March 2025. We've been building up to that point, onboarding more and more participants. I did some experimenting with, rather than just 1 trade a day, we tried up to 10 trades a day with 10 different symbols and fewer consensus for each one, thinking that we could take advantage of the diversification of 10 different trades a day and come away with a better result at the end of the day. And that really didn't work. It was better, we found, leading up to March. We found it was better to take as many participants as we could, all for 1 single trade. So we started getting much better luck with that. And we thought, okay, now we've established exactly what the protocol is going to be for this entire official experiment. We're going to start it in March. We're going to run it for 6 months exactly, and we're going to end the experiment. And we're not going to change a thing. We're going to do it exactly the same way. Every single day, 5 days a week, there's going to be a trade, and we're going to use whatever consensus we get to make that trade. And so we started in March. We built up to, like I said, we started with probably 100 participants contributing 1,000 trials every morning, making a trade based on that. And we got all the way up to 5,000 trials, so 500 people contributing towards the end. We were able to earn, at the end of the day, we were able to earn this up. $41,000 was the actual profit earned. And there's a theoretical profit of $265,000 because of glitches and errors and little mistakes here and there, a little bit less than that. The percentage of the trades that were profitable was 58.1%. So that's all we had. The percentage of the trials that were correct was only, I need to look this up, it's going to be 50.1%. It's really, really tiny. So extremely small. But this is what consensus does for you. So taking a consensus can improve, can magnify your 50.1% all the way up to 58%, because that's what our trade success rate was. So it does work. Consensus absolutely works.
Can you explain that for people who aren't on top of statistics? How would that work? How do you go from 50.1 to 58, did you say?
Yeah.
Explain that a little more.
So if imagine that I had one single participant in the experiment and they were contributing their trial for one trade. And over time, I'm measuring that their win rate is about 50.1%, because that's what the average person was doing, was about 50.1%. So instead of doing that, what if instead I got two participants and said, okay, you guys are both going to work on this one trade. You both submit your trials to me. The trial from person A predicts up. The trial from person B predicts up. Well, all of a sudden, when they both agree, all of a sudden now our win rate, if we use those two people every single day, it'll jump up to 50.3%, 50.2%, or 50.3%, or whatever it actually is. There's a math formula. You can figure this out. It's used in signal processing actually all the time. So it works here with ARV as well. So that's all we're doing, is we're basically taking our 100 trials that are coming in, and we're saying, okay, how many of them we're predicting up? How many of them we're predicting down? We're going to go with the majority vote. And when we do that, the greater the number, the higher the win rate goes. So we get to the point where we've got 5,000 coming in. Our win rate goes up quite significantly, up to like mid 50%, up to high. We were I think at one point we were probably at 70% win rate. And then things leveled. It's kind of what consensus does.
What was the time period again? How many months?
6-month period from March till August. And then so what happened in August is we decided we were going to continue on for 2 more months. No, we decided we were going to continue. We didn't have an end date, and we did continue, and things were not well. We lost money. And so we stopped at the end of the 2 months.
And you think it was because you started to add in several trades a day instead of the
No,
one
we were
trade?
just still one trade a day.
Oh, you were?
Yes, we
Okay,
were.
so you hadn't changed your protocols,
No.
but the last 2 months you started to go downward.
Yeah. The one thing that changed between the 6-month official experiment and the 2-month kind of post-experiment was our attitudes were completely different. We were tired. We were exhausted. We went through all of the fraud prevention, and we went through employee issues, and it was just so much work, and technical issues. And, as you're onboarding so many people, and issues with the work platform, increasing their prices. I mean, we're paying 500 people $5 every 2 weeks. It adds up. That's a minimum. We had to pay the work platform another $5. So $10 plus the bonus.
Every trade was 10, or
Yeah.
every trial was $10.
Well, every 10 days was, $10. I have to figure out I'll tell you what it was. I'll tell you what our budget was exactly for all of the payments, because I've got a here. So over the 6-month period, we paid 15,000 just PayPal payments, and that's outside the work platform. That was people that we found directly in the Philippines ourselves. We paid 21,000, and for our African, that's again outside the work platform. And we paid $48,000 to the work platform. So $50, $60, $70, $80, $85,000 we paid to the platforms.
Wow. What were your expenses compared to your profit?
So
gross
for the
income?
6-month experiment, the total trading profits were 241,000. Total expenses were 93,000. So we had a profit of 147,000 after all the expenses. That's how it worked out.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
So I think
And
that's kind of important too, rather than sort of focusing so much on how much money did we make. At the end of the day, it's how much money did we get to keep, and that was 147,000 because we had costs in there that were part of the whole thing. Could not have done that without the people. Without our participants, we could not have done that. So it was money well paid for these people, right? And as well, no time was, my time isn't in there. And, much of Jeff's time, my programmer, his time's not in there either. He was making a small amount of money.
how many hours a day did you and your programmer spend on this project?
I'm going to say it probably averaged out to a few hours a day. 3 or 4, I'd say, because there were times I'd take off and even come back. I'd say overall probably averaged about 3 hours a day.
Are you going to continue this project? And then if so, what would you do differently?
No, I'm not going to continue it. It's just too much work. It really is too much work. And also too, I am a trader and I manage a fund, and make the comparison between ARV, between Time Machine and the fund that I manage. When I'm quantifying risks with the fund, I really know what I'm dealing with because I've got a big history I can look back on. I've got price history, all kinds of tools that I can use to know what my risk is going forward, and I can manage that risk. Whereas Time Machine's different because we don't really know we don't know for absolute certain that it's going to continue going on like it is. Financial markets, we have a pretty good idea that what has happened in the past for us is pretty much going to continue to happen. It doesn't always, but it's more reliable because it's priced and it's based on people. But we don't really know what's going on here. It's too new. And what happened over the last, the 2-month follow-up experiment, where things were not going very well for us, who knows if that wasn't just going to continue on for another 6 months to a year. And so it was sort of like the drawdown was unlimited in Time Machine, whereas the drawdown in the regular financial markets is somewhat quantified. It's kind of the issue. That's why I think I wouldn't want to continue doing this. It's worth continuing somebody to take it on and continue to do this. I think it's absolutely research value. It's worth doing.
What about combining those two? Have you thought of ways where either using ARV or some intuitive processes along with everything else you use with your fund? What would that look like?
I've tried to model that many, many times, and it never works. And I don't know why.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think that probably would be a question for a statistician. They could probably tell you why. But it doesn't work. I've never found that it worked.
But then going back to the whole reason you got into this is where you would just go and look at the numbers and you already had those in your head. Are you sometimes using intuition even now to make your decisions, or you could really say, no, it's purely logic based on this modeling?
Yes, I run automated algorithmic trading strategies, and we don't touch them once they're running. I never touch them really. So no.
And with those, statistically, how accurate are those?
Different. It's a different kind of performance metric than Time Machine or ARV. With Time Machine, what we're really looking for is a greater percentage of wins of winning trades than losing trades. So our win rate is really important. If we have a higher percentage of winning trades, we're going to make money. at the end of the day. With conventional trading, our win rate is actually 37%, but our average winning trade is about 3 times what our average losing trade is. So that's why that works. And it's a different thing altogether. And that's probably why that you can't mix the two together. I don't really understand why, but it just doesn't seem to work.
The original projects that were done by Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, I forget the exact numbers, but each of them at different times yielded about 150,000, give or take. But they did far less trials. Like they did about 11 trials and used a few viewers. So what do you think about using ARV, even if, say, you did 10 trials, but then you invested more money for each trial?
If I look back to when I was actually doing that, for the first experiment, do only a few trials. There's many times where I only did a few trials for trade. And I think that I would say that I would go through periods of time, maybe at the very beginning, where I could do that and I could have a good hit rate on the trades, maybe 60% winning trades, which was great. But and the reason why I started doing more consensus, I think, is because my hit rate started falling off. So I started getting tired and maybe bored. Something psychological was going on, and that started dropping down. And so I started having to add more and more trials to get that back up again to use consensus. So that's kind of, I don't know. There are lots of people that do ARV and, bet on sporting events and trade markets. And so I think it works, but it wasn't really working for me after a while.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I think a lot of us in the field have observed is the decline effect. And I think the decline effect per participant has been observed across so many different parapsychological experiments, not just remote viewing. But yeah, the idea of going in, doing limited trials and getting out, and then perhaps making larger investments. If it's all about what is your goal. Is your goal to see if you can get consistency over a period of time, or is it just to make money and make as much money as you can before the decline effect starts to happen?
Yep.
Now, your website, timemachine.com, I think it is still up. Are you still recruiting viewers or not at this time?
We stopped the program, and no, they're not. They can't. There's nowhere where somebody can sign up to do a. We have a sort of a sample application that we've written. It's still active. You can go into arvapp.time-machine.com and use our app there and generate 2 random images and enter your transcript in and submit it. We'll do the analysis for you and tell you which one it predicts. And then you can input the outcome of your event, if it's a coin flip or whatever you want, and see if you got it right or wrong. We've got that set up and it's still running just to sort of demonstrate what the LLM do as far as analysis goes. So that's available to anybody if they want to go and play with that. They can use that. That's the only kind of software part of the whole program we've still got running. Is that sort of a demonstration of the technology.
And what kind of feedback did you get from participants? Again, many of these were brand new to remote viewing. And what kinds of comments did you receive as far as the impact it had on their view of these topics?
I found that really motivating aspect of the whole project because we just got so many amazing comments from people just completely blown away, surprised by what happened when they went in to do their first set of trials. We set up a little showcase on our website where you can go in and look at some of the really high-performing trials, and there's some amazing trials in there. Yes, it's possible that some of them could be just chance occurrences, but there are some incredible, and you can go in there and look. It's time-machine.com and click on showcase and you can see some of them. Yeah, we got lots of really, really great comments, and that was actually one of our stated objectives, goals of the whole program. The experiment was, number one, to expose as many people around the world as we could to this incredible human skill that we have that many of us don't know we've got it. I'm sure some of them knew that they had some ability, but most of them had no idea. Very skeptical going in, expecting too much, just wanting to get paid, but wanting to do a good job, and then just being really surprised about what happened. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah. So they said you changed their outlook on these topics and even what they themselves were capable of doing.
Yeah. And, it'd be interesting to do a follow-up to see how much of that effect has lasted. I mean, have they applied that in their lives at all? I don't know. That would be interesting to see if it actually made a change to their lives or if it was just very short-lived. This is all kind of like a parlor trick, right? Oh, it's kind of neat. I didn't know I could do that. Oh, well, that's possible. I'm sure a lot of them did that, right?
So in closing, what are your goals for the future? Do you have any projects on the horizon related to remote viewing?
No, not for a little while. I'm tired. It took a lot out of us, the whole project. If anything, I'm interested and I would like to pursue non-ARV protocol designed to predict event outcomes where you're not actually associating and you're going to be encountering those issues where your brain's going to get involved because you know what it is. But I've had some success just in experiments or unofficial experiments of ways in which I can make my brain not think and yet still know the event that I'm trying to predict. I think it takes a little bit of practice, but I'm kind of intrigued with that. And I'd like to kind of spend more time exploring that. Well, that's, if I did something else, I'd.
Yeah, that's where I am as well. I think that John Knowles and I wrote a 700-page book on associative remote viewing. We included your 13-year experiment in there. And we wrote it after being immersed in all of this for over a decade. And that's where we both are at as well, where we're very interested in continuing with remote viewing future events, but doing so directly where it's like, okay, when's the next earthquake gonna occur, or what's going to happen in January of 2027, and getting all that rich data instead of just describing pictures associated with the event, and then learning to work with front loading. And I had done a study a couple of years ago that was sponsored by the IRVA research unit, where we we surveyed many experienced remote viewers, and we asked them, how do you feel about working blind versus working with front loading, where the front loading would be what the event is, or that, go
Right.
look at January 2026. What do you see happening? And the ones that said that they did have no problem working with that front loading were more experienced and did attribute it to having a higher skill level. Ones that were more at the beginning of their practice or training said, yeah, I can't work with that front loading. So you've done more remote viewing sessions than perhaps anyone on the planet after having done thousands and thousands. And so that would make sense that you're ready to challenge yourself in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree, it's the same thing with me. I think that there are ways that and I keep referring to it as your subconscious mind, as I don't really know what it is, when nobody does really. But if we call it the subconscious mind, there are ways that your subconscious mind is trying to communicate to you, and you just have to listen to it. And you have to find little tricks that you can play on your brain to stop it from getting into interfering with what your subconscious mind is telling you, right? And all kinds of different little things you can try to do that. But I've had some success.
Well, and when information comes in that you didn't expect, that can be helpful too, which of
Yes.
course you can't control that. Maybe future events are in alignment with what you're expecting, and then it's harder to tell.
Right.
Have you found that
Yeah,
makes it easier?
I think surprise, and that's what we also told our participants too when they're remote viewing their trials. If something is a real surprise to you, then that's usually really important, and one way that you can a directly remote view an outcome of an event is if something occurs to you that's a complete surprise. Like how you're asking yourself, where did that come from? Where did that memory of, something, childhood memory, where did that all of a sudden come from? That's your subconscious brain figuring out a way of communicating to you. Yeah. So yeah, I find the same thing. Yeah. Surprises.
Your example with your son, where he was at a distance asleep and you're seeing this light in his room that's never been there before.
That's a good example. Yeah. I mean, so that was a known event. I knew what I was predicting, but it was what came through was a very big surprise. Just didn't make sense to me. That's something that's valuable, right? Whereas if it was something that was expected, I could discount that. And that's the trick, I think, is going through all these things that are going through your mind and tossing out a lot of them, not hanging on to any too tightly, waiting for some bizarre, weird thing that you're kind of like, oh, that's the thing I need to pay attention to. These other things, I can just ignore them because they're just my ego or, my brain or something getting in the way.
Yeah. And can you give us a couple examples of things you've started to tap into where you felt like you may have had some success?
I have actually done a few where I've gone out and asked myself the question, which futures contract or commodity is going to be the highest performer over the next month, right? So you've got all kinds of things. You've got agriculture, you've got foreign currencies, you've got stock indexes, you've got interest rates like bonds, and even crypto is part of it now. So there's, cocoa and pork. There's lots of different things. Sugar, there's all kinds of different things. So what can pop into your head is unlikely to be something that you're actually thinking about. And there are lots of opportunities for surprising thoughts to pop in there, right? Just one that happened kind of recently was, I like to do these things before I go to sleep because you're sort of halfway between, you're tired, but you can kind of go into a dream state before you actually fall asleep and don't remember what's going on. I remember I was sort of overhead, there's a big, huge truck, right down the freeway, right in front of me. And I knew what the truck was too. It was a big tanker truck, down cylinder, kind of a tanker truck going by. And I was like, wow, that came as a big surprise. And it took me a few minutes to think about that. So what could that possibly be? And of course, it's kind of obvious that it's oil. There's an oil tanker, right? And like afterwards, I was like, oh yeah, that's obvious. But at first I was like, oh, what could that possibly be? Why did I think of that? So it's those kind of things that happen that you're kind of like, oh, that's real interesting. Where did that come from? Like, it wasn't my brain thinking about that. In fact, I couldn't even figure it out after it happened. Right? I'm sure that you've had the same kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a client who asked me about an investment in crypto that she had, and she was really, really relying on cashing this out and hoping it was going to go up over the next few months, or she wouldn't be able to buy a house that she had already put $100,000 deposit on. And if her crypto didn't do well in the next few months, she's going to lose her deposit. So it was high stakes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know she wants to hear one thing, but I have to tell her the truth. So I did the same thing, like lay down at night before I went to sleep, just closed my eyes, and I saw an image of a hot air balloon, and it started to rise off the ground just a little bit, and then it exploded. And I was like, well, I don't know what this means exactly, but you would want the balloon to go up way high, and it didn't. It only went off the ground a little bit. But then I cleared that off. I was like, okay, I'm just going to try this one more time. And then the next image I got was of an airplane, and kind of the same thing. It took off, but it was only at about 500 feet, and then it just exploded. And again, okay, I might not be able to translate this exactly because, of course, with crypto, people want to know what number will it get to? What point should I sell? And I couldn't tell that exactly, but you wouldn't want a plane to, to stop at 500 feet. So I kind of equated that with, maybe like 10,000 feet was like at 100, it would go up to 100, and 500 feet in an airplane would only be like 5%. I don't know. It's a little hard to, give the exact number, but what I could say is this is not looking good, not looking good. And I love how I really call that clairvoyance, like how our symbols can come up and tell us things that are bypassing what our logical minds are thinking about. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It was fun, Deborah. It was fun. It was a lot of fun, actually. Good conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and congratulations on your project. That was an enormous undertaking, and you should be really proud of it.
Thanks. It was, I'd like to see, it had its fun moments, we'll put it that way. It did have its fun moments, but it was a lot of work. And it was kind of like, we can't forget that it's incredible that it actually worked, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, you're going through this and it's just coming another day at work. And you kind of stop and you kind of like, wait a second here. We're actually running a time machine. Like, don't forget that, you guys. Like, that's what I kept saying to my employees. Like, we're running a time machine and it's actually working. This is pretty cool. So I can't forget that. So that's a thing
awesome
to remember. Yeah.
New Thinking Aloud is a non-profit endeavor. Your contributions to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation make a meaningful difference in our ability to produce new videos. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, Mind, Body, Spirit University, a leader in fully accredited in-person and online U.S. college degree programs in the topics we cover here. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org. For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org.